Hello everyone and welcome back to the Undercut, and today we are going to be ranking the driver lineups for the F1 2025 season. Essentially what we're going to be doing is going through all the teams in alphabetical order and giving them a score out of 10. And then we're going to compare, contrast our scores and debate at our will. Obviously, there is some very obvious high scores in here, maybe some obvious low scores, but I think with the amount of rookies that there is this season, it's going to be interesting to see where we rank these drivers with so many unknowns about so many different drivers. As I mentioned, loads of rookies and also loads of different driver changes as well. So let's just kick this straight off with Alpine. Obviously, Jack Doohan, Pierre Gasly. Jack, where have you put Alpine and what score have you given them?
Yeah, I mean, it's Doohan letting the side down here.
Yeah.
It's definitely Doohan. I've given him a 4 out of 10, Alpine. It's not great. It's not bad. It's not bad. I think Gasly, if you put him up one against most of these drivers on the grid, he'd be up there. But Jack Doohan, I just don't think he's good enough for Formula One. I think it is a Latifi, a Sargent situation for Alpine.
That's interesting because I've also gone with a 4 out of 10 for Alpine as well. I agree on the most part. You know, I think Jack Doohan, I don't rate him compared to these other rookies. I don't know why. It's just I've got this sort of feeling inside of me. I think a large part comes from the fact that during Abu Dhabi, he didn't really give me much of an oomph, and I know it was one race, and I know that he's got a whole season to prove himself, but when we saw Behrman come in, he did bits in his first race and his second race. Other rookies that we've seen before have come in and done bits and picked up the pace straight away. We think about Lewis Hamilton, we think about Max Verstappen. Jack Doohan didn't really set the world alight, and maybe he takes time to get... Even Liam Lawson, yeah, exactly. Maybe he takes time to get going, but he just didn't give me that confidence that he's going to put Alpine at the level that they want to be.
No, something else that's probably not helping him is the fact that we've seen Antonelli, Behrman, Hadjar, and Bortoletto all race F2 this year. Well, 2024.
Yeah.
So we've watched them all in F2. We've watched, obviously, Behrman in F1. We've seen Antonelli do his testing or his practice sessions as well. So we've seen them actually racing a car, racing an F2, getting glimpses of them in Formula One. Obviously, we've seen Doohan have one shot, but we haven't seen Doohan race in the previous years since then, really. No. We've seen him in glimpses of him here and there, but we've barely seen nothing of him compared to the others recently anyway.
Yeah, so that might be a little bit of a sort of a bias, I guess, against Doohan.
In that
sense. But maybe, you know, our thoughts on Doohan will change in the future. It's just right now, I don't know. I don't see Doohan really doing that well. There is that rumor he's got a 5-race contract or something, and then they might replace him with Colapinto or someone similar. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. But anyway, let's move on to Aston Martin then. What score have you given Aston Martin?
Yes, Aston Martin, 5.5. Straight in. I mean, it's a difficult one with Aston Martin because obviously they've got an experienced lineup now. They have a really experienced lineup, but however, Alonso is coming to the end, whether you want to admit it or not. He is. And Lance Stroll is, well, less said about Lance, the better.
Poor Stroll catching strays, man.
Nah, we've seen it year after year now. Like, obviously, he's had his glimpses. You think back to that Turkey wet race. It's phenomenal qualifying. You have moments with Lance, don't you?
Yeah.
But that is nowhere near enough for a season. 1 or 2 moments, whether it be in qualifying or the race, is nowhere near enough for a 24-race season.
No, you are completely right.
So, it lets them down. Aston Martin... Obviously, an aging Fernando Alonso, shit Lance Stroll. It's not a phenomenal lineup, but it's a lineup that could save you P6 in the championship this year.
Yeah. And with Adrian Newey coming in,
Yeah.
it shouldn't be too bad. I've gone with a 6 out of 10 for Aston Martin, so a little nicer than you, but yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said. Obviously, Alonso is coming to the end. He definitely isn't the driver he was 10 years ago, and that's natural, but he is still one of the best on the grid, I believe, just obviously not at that peak level anymore. And of course, Lance Stroll just isn't good enough. If that lineup was, say, Alonso and Sergio Perez, for example, or as it could have been once upon a time, Sebastian Vettel and Perez, if Stroll wasn't in that seat and Aston Martin had sort of congregated some of the drivers that they've managed to pull over the last few years, this would be one of the best driver lineups on the grid. But unfortunately, they decide to persist on keeping Stroll, which, I think is holding them back, personally. But yeah, it's just
I
one
agree.
of them, isn't it?
I agree. Yeah.
Let's move on to the big one then. Next up is, of course, Ferrari.
Yes, Ferrari. I've given them a 9.5.
Oh, yes.
9.5. It's not quite a 10. And I don't think it's quite a 10 purely off the basis of Charles Leclerc hasn't won a championship yet.
That's such a fine parameter.
No, it is, because you think about because we had a discussion about all the others, all the greatest that there could be. Alonso, Hamilton, for example, both championship winners. Prost, Senna, both championship winners. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
Charles Leclerc isn't quite there. Look, that could change at the end of this year. I think it will change at the end of this year.
Yeah.
But as of right now, it is just the 9.5 because they have the greatest driver of all time in their team. And they probably have the quickest qualifier on the grid as of right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've also gone with a 9.5 out of 10 for the exact same reasons as you. It's not quite Prost, Senna. It's not quite Hamilton, Alonso. Other examples I'm trying to think. It's not quite at that level.
Even
possibly...
Coulthard and Hakkinen.
Well,
that probably is that level.
Yeah, it probably is. I mean, Coulthard in his day was good. Hakkinen, obviously.
Coulthard in his day was rivaling Schumacher.
Underrated. A driver.
So underrated.
But yeah, I think a 10 out of 10 is Verstappen Hamilton. A 9.5 out of 10 is Hamilton Charles, Hamilton Lando, Verstappen Lando. Maybe even Charles. Yeah, Charles Verstappen, Charles Lando, whatever. A 10 out of 10.
Do Charles Lando.
Maybe it's a 9. I don't know, but either way, the point is that a 10 out of 10 is one of the three of Alonso Verstappen, Alonso Hamilton, Verstappen Hamilton. It's got to be. It has to be that. Like,
you both have to be world champions really for a 10.
Yeah. So it's. Yeah, obviously. But still, the best driver lineup on the grid by far. The best score we're going to give. But this is where it gets really juicy now because we've passed Ferrari, which is the obvious outlier of them all. Definitely the best driver lineup this season. Let's move on to Haas in the midfield.
Yeah, Haas, I've given them a 5. Straight in with a 5. I mean, a little bit less than Aston Martin, purely off the basis of Alonso is better than Ocon still. He is, without shadow of a doubt. And then rookies, when they come in, obviously Behrman's got a little bit of experience, so it was harder to judge. But it's only 3 races. We don't know how the Haas is going to be. We don't know how he's going to be over a whole season. Whereas Stroll, we know he can pick up something at least at some point. Behrman could absolutely have a stinker and do a Stoffel Van Dorn. So it was hard to judge, but I've given them just less than Aston Martin. But come the end of the year, all these ratings could change.
They could, and I completely understand why, because obviously he's a rookie, there's a lot of unknowns. Obviously, Ocon is going to a new team as well, so you've got to consider that maybe Haas isn't a fit for Ocon.
Yeah.
So there's that possibility as well. But I've gone with a 6 out of 10 for this driver lineup. I believe a lot in Ocon. I think a fresh start for him will be good. He's a quick driver, solid midfield driver. Behrman as well. We've seen what he can do at Ferrari and at Haas in the same season, last season. So I'm confident this will do bits, but like I said, that there are unknowns, and as you alluded to as well, Behrman could end up stinking out the gaff by the end of the season. You don't know.
Yeah.
So a 6 out of 10, I'd say, is about right for
I mean,
Haas.
if he has another Brazil performance,
No, exactly. I mean, if the season is a third, if you have at least maybe half a season as a Brazil performance, then it's not looking good for him.
yeah.
Let's move on to Kick Sauber then.
Yeah, I'm 5.5, so obviously same as Aston Martin, slightly better than Haas. And I've given them slightly better than Haas because, one, they've got Nico Hulkenberg, who we've seen in 2024 do bits in that Haas, destroy that midfield at times, destroying Red Bulls at times.
Yeah.
That's what he was doing. And then obviously they've got the F2 champion, which arguably, looking at all the rookies, is my favourite rookie on the grid right this year. So,
yeah.
5.5,
I thought was quite low for you, really. I've gone with a 6.5 out of 10 for Kick Sauber. Yeah, I mean, Nico Hulkenberg, I think, is probably the best midfield driver on the grid. Just flat out. Maybe it's close with Gasly. Might be.
I would say Gasly, personally.
It's close with him and Gasly. I mean, to be fair, actually, looking at the list, it's close with all of them. Yuki's up there. Obviously, Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz are now midfield drivers, so it's close, but
I would say Gasly, personally.
Yeah, that's fair, but Hulkenberg, I think, is up there, definitely.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Gabriel Bortoleto is the F2 champion, so 6.5 out of 10 for me. I think out of all of the midfield lineups, I think this is one of the strongest, just purely because Hulkenberg, probably one of the top midfield drivers, and Bortoleto, F2 champion.
Yeah. Hands down, F2 champion. Obviously, my 5.5 seems a little low, but if you compare it to the other scores that I have given, it's probably right for my list.
Yeah.
In a way. So, I'm not mad.
Well, let's move on then to McLaren, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri.
Yes, I've given them an 8.5.
Okay.
And now the reason for an 8.5, like these two, obviously we saw last year, was phenomenal. Oscar, is it got points in every race?
I think so. He definitely finished every race.
He finished every race for 100% sure. So obviously consistency is there. They obviously both won the World Championship together last year. Great teamwork, obviously. Scrutinization in terms of being like choosing a driver for the Drivers' Championship at times last year, but obviously that's the team's fault, not their fault. However, I couldn't give them a 9. Purely off the basis that there is a pairing that you could put together that would be a 9 on this grid, and that is Lando and Charles.
I understand that. I have gone with a 9, though. A 9 out of 10 for McLaren. Because, and I was close to giving him a 9.5 as well, actually. Because the thing is, we are ranking them as a driver pairing.
Yeah.
Lewis and Charles on paper is quite possibly one of the best driver lineups we've ever had in Formula 1.
Yeah.
Obviously, unless it proves itself to be otherwise. Lando and Oscar isn't that, but they've just won the World Championship. They work together as teammates, and when we're ranking lineups, I think that is an important factor to consider. So when you look at the drivers individually and you go, would Oscar possibly be in the top 5? Maybe he isn't. Is Lando in the top 3? Maybe he is, but he doesn't beat Verstappen, he doesn't beat Hamilton, maybe he doesn't beat Charles, I don't know. But together, these two are proven that they can work, and Oscar's only getting better, Lando is only getting better. They've just won the World Championship. They're going for the drivers this next year. I think a 9 is thoroughly deserved for McLaren.
Do you think, though, that partial basis of it's worked this past year, 2024, could be down to the fact of, one, there was no bias for the Drivers' Championship in terms of they weren't battling each other for it. Do you think if it was just a straight dogfight of McLaren out front for the championship, do you think they would work that well together, or do you think they'll be coming together? Because I think them two will crash.
Well, that's the interesting thing.
I think
This
there'd be way less harmony than what we've seen this year if it was just McLaren out at the front.
100%, and that's the interesting thing. This upcoming season is going to either it's gonna either break McLaren or it's gonna solidify Oscar and Lando as one of the best driver pairings that we've had in recent history. Because if McLaren are out front from the very start and Oscar and Lando are on level playing field from race one, there is going to be at some point in the season a fight for a win that could potentially dictate the world championship. So we'll see. And like I said, Oscar's always getting better. Lando's always getting better. The interesting thing about McLaren, though, is if Oscar had come from a different team and had signed for McLaren this season, I don't think I would have given it a 9. I would have given it probably an 8. The only reason I've given it a 9 is because it's proven that it works.
Well,
So if it doesn't work this season, then quite possibly it could be lower if we did this video again a year on, right? So
yeah.
I get what you're saying.
Well, that's kind of why I've given it an 8.5, is because I'd like to see a straight shootout between the two of them to see if there is actually that team harmony or whether it was just managed by the team in a way last year, which I think it could have been. And 2 is the fact that you've got a pairing on this list that would be a 9 of Charles and Lando. If you put them two together, it's better than this, but it's not better than Hamilton and Charles.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's close, and Charles and Lando is definitely a 9. Oscar and Lando is a 9 because it works for me.
You, it's 8.5 for me.
For me, yeah. Right. Well, anyway, let's move on then to another interesting lineup, which I think we could discuss, is Mercedes.
Yes, Mercedes. I've given them a 6.5, and that's why obviously my other ones are a little bit lower.
Yeah.
Because I do think Mercedes have a decent lineup. I think they're probably 5th best lineup this year.
Yep.
In having a rookie and Antonelli there. Obviously, George Russell, we've seen this year, he's got moments of pure brilliance. I think that race pace, he might have really good race pace, but Hamilton might have blistering race pace. We don't know that. But all that we know is you put Hamilton at the back with George at the front, they'll finish together.
And they did in Vegas.
They did in Vegas. They did in Abu Dhabi as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's what's lacking. But George, obviously, qualifying, he's up there with Charles as one of the best on the grid. Strong will keep getting points for Mercedes. Antonelli, I do think that this kid does have raw good race pace. However, is he going to fulfill the expectation? Because quite a lot of people's expectation is the next Max Verstappen.
Yeah, which is already damaging if he doesn't live up to that.
Exactly. Obviously, he's coming in this young. Isn't it? If he wins in the first 3 races or something, he beats Max's record.
Possibly.
I think it's something like that, which is crazy to think. I didn't think anyone could beat Max's record as the youngest race winner.
Oh, it looked impossible, didn't it?
It did. And then, yeah, so he's got this big stigma around him. He's going to be the next Max Verstappen, the next Lewis Hamilton, which is damaging for him. Obviously, if he doesn't fulfill that, he's going to seen now as a flop to some people. But I think we've just got to manage our expectation with Antonelli in terms of he's got to get grips to that car. The Mercedes ain't an easy car to get grips with.
No, as we saw. I mean, Antonelli felt that firsthand. He crashed in Monza.
Yeah.
So I've given Mercedes a 7 out of 10. So very similar to your score. I pretty much agree with everything you said about Antonelli. There's a lot of unknowns with him. Do I rate him above the other rookies? I think I'm sort of on a similar level with him and Bortoletto. Only because he's been hyped up so much, and we saw what he did in the test. We saw what he did in practice. He was on a very quick lap. I think this kid is special. But like you said, we've got to manage our expectations. It's not quite that sort of 8, 9 sort of out of 10 level. Russell does bring it up there, but Antonelli being a rookie doesn't equate just yet. We'll have to see how he does this season. So it's a strong lineup, definitely. Toto definitely believes it is and believes in Antonelli. So hopefully it pulls through. Yeah, I think it's a good lineup. But like I said, Antonelli, there's a few unknowns there. So it is a 7 out of 10 for me. So, I mean, let's just move on then. I mean, another interesting rookie lineup with Yuki Tsunoda and Isaac Hadjar as the rookie in RB.
Yeah, I've given them a 5, so same as Haas. I do think Yuki is better than Ocon.
Okay.
I do. However, Hadjar, obviously he's come second in the F2 season. Had a phenomenal F2 season. But it's unknown. It's unknown with Hadjar. I've got a sinking feeling, and I get it with quite a lot of Red Bull junior drivers, where they're just not going to fulfill what they're meant to be, like a Jean-Eric Verne, a Daniel Kvyat.
Jean-Eric Verne.
Do you know what I mean?
No, I get you. He's going to be like he's going to come in, he's going to do well, but he's not going to beat Yuki, and he's not going to set the world alight, and he'll stay in RB for like 2 or 3 years, and then he might get a seat at Haas, and then he'll get booted out.
Yeah.
Like, that's the type of vibes I'm getting from Hadjar. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's going to do really well. He'll get promoted to Red Bull and win the World Championship. I don't know.
I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Hadjar's just giving me the Jean-Eric, the Daniel Kvyat sort of vibe right now.
Yeah, I completely get that. What score did you give them?
I gave him a 5. I matched it with Haas, but purely off the basis I think Yuki is better than Ocon, and you can't ignore Hadjar coming second in F2. So, yeah. Behrman, Hadjar, you got to say around equal.
I agreed with you on that sentiment. I gave them a 6. It was kind of the same for me. I gave them the same score as Haas. Yuki and Ocon are very close for me. Hadjar obviously came second in the F2 championship, but what Hadjar doesn't have on Behrman is that Behrman has sort of proved he can do it in F1 in 2 different cars, 2 different races, scored points in both. Brazil obviously is an outlier, but we'll see.
Behrman's also proved he can find more walls than laps in Brazil.
Yeah, exactly. But Hadjar, yeah, it's an unknown. I don't think he'll beat Yuki. But the thing is, I think it's kind of unfair on Hadjar in a way, because he's going into an RB that at the end of last season was just absolutely nowhere. And if it continues to be nowhere this season, then Yuki beating him and Hadjar not really, beating Yuki is going to make Hadjar look a little bit stinky.
Yeah.
And I hope I'm wrong, but that's the vibes I'm getting. I can't write him off. He came second. He pushed Bortoleto to the very end in the F2 Championship. So, you can't write Hadjar off at all.
Yeah.
Let's move on then to another interesting one. It is Red Bull with Max Verstappen and Liam Lawson.
Yeah, Red Bull, I mean, straight off the bat, they're the 4th best pairing on the grid this year. The 4th best with a 7.
Okay.
And I'll tell you that they could have been the 3rd best, pushing 2nd best almost, if it was Yuki and not Lawson in that seat.
That's fair.
I do think Lawson and Yuki will have a switcheroo partway through the season. But yeah, no, obviously we know Max Verstappen. Yeah. We know how good he is. Some would say the best on the grid at this current point in time. Which he is. Okay.
Yeah, he is. I mean, let's not kid ourselves here. Let's not kid ourselves here.
Leave me alone.
I mean, to be fair, there's a shout that Charles could be this season.
I think Charles will be this season.
It's very much so. He's getting to that point.
Yeah, but Max Verstappen, 4-time world champion on the bounce. Should be 3. But yeah, it's Liam Lawson letting that side down. I don't think he's ready for Red Bull. I think Red Bull have made a mistake in terms of it should be Liam and Hadjar in the RB, and it should be Yuki and Max in the Red Bull. But we went over this extensive amount of times in our previous 2 videos.
And the previous season, because the
Yeah.
topic of conversation most weeks was, is Perez going to get booted out of Red Bull? And it's funny.
That was 2024.
Yes, I agree. I've also gone with a 7 out of 10. Now, some people may go, well, you've given Mercedes and Red Bull the same score. You said Mercedes, George Russell and Kimi Antonelli unknowns with the rookie. Lawson has proven he has what it takes in F1, and obviously Max Verstappen is the best driver on the grid. How have they got the same score, Lewis? I have no idea, right? So this is my explanation. The reason I've given them the same score, Max Verstappen obviously is the best driver on the grid and can get the maximum out of that Red Bull at all times. However, Liam Lawson, I don't think he's ready for Red Bull, number 1. Number 2, I also think that is not... Red Bull is never a good driver pairing. On paper, Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen should be one of the best, if not the best pairing on the grid. Because Sergio Perez was the best midfield driver in his generation. And Max Verstappen, obviously, we know. On paper, that is one of the best driver lineups. On track, it isn't. Because Perez cannot take to that Red Bull car the way Max can. And we know why. The same happened with Gasly, and the same happened with Albon, who have gone on to do bigger and better things at other teams that aren't Red Bull. Especially Pierre Gasly, who has proven himself to be one of the best drivers on the grid, in my opinion. I think the same will happen to Liam Lawson, unfortunately. He's a good driver, but I just don't think he'll take to the Red Bull. So I've given it a 7 out of 10 in the fact that I understand that on paper it is strong. It is a strong lineup, especially with Verstappen in there and Lawson, you know, with the potential that Lawson is showing. But I don't think Lawson will take to it, and that's just my opinion. That's why I've given it a lower score than potentially maybe other people would have. No,
well, you gave it the same score as me.
Well, yeah, I did, but I gave it the same score as Mercedes. I think Mercedes' lineup has a bigger chance of working out than Red Bull's, but on paper, Red Bull's is theoretically stronger, so it sort of balances out. It sort of goes both ways and balances out in the middle.
I get that.
Yeah.
I do get that.
That's the reason why I've given 7 out of 10. Anyway, let's move on to the last pairing, which is, of course, Alexander Albon and Carlos Sainz.
Yes, Williams. What a lineup.
I know. How have they finessed this?
I don't know. And I have given them 7.5.
Mm-hmm.
Purely off the basis of... My thought process behind this was it's a pairing of a really one outstanding and one really good midfield driver. Do you know what I mean? Like Carlos Sainz, you could put him in a top team. He's a top driver. Alex Albon, one of the best midfield drivers. He is. I'll openly admit that one. But for me, you put them together, they're both second drivers. If in a top team, though, they're not a number 1 driver in a top team. And there's something lacking where I think if you did put them in the top team, neither of them would win a championship. I don't think they're champion drivers. I don't think either of them could be, but they're really good drivers. They're arguably the best. Both of them, you could argue, are the best midfield driver.
Do you reckon it's sort of a like a Barrichello type situation going on?
Yeah, a Barrichello, mate. You could argue maybe if they got into the look of what Button had, they could look out a championship.
Yes, it's one of them where you get to, you're at the peak of your career, you land a car that's 2 seconds quicker than everyone else, you're going to win a title.
Yeah. But they're just not champion, which is why they're so... Like, I would say, personally, for me, I think if you had a straight shootout between, say, Hülkenberg and Gasly were a team, and Albon and Sainz were a team, I'm backing Gasly and Hülkenberg over them two.
Ooh, that's close. That's
It's
so close.
but I am backing them because I think that them two are better than these two.
That's crazy. Crazy statement. I think Gasly, yeah. No, it's so close. I don't know because I could give reasons for any of them to be ahead. Maybe not Hulkenberg. I don't know. You know, I can't. I don't know. That's close, man.
That's a crazy thought, that, isn't it?
It's a crazy thought. I completely agree. I've given it an 8 out of 10. This is one of the strongest lineups on the grid. In fact, it's probably the third strongest.
It is the third strongest, yes.
Where Red Bull has Verstappen, but obviously an unknown in Lawson. Where Mercedes has Russell, but an unknown in Antonelli. And we can go down the grid. Gasly, Doohan, Hulkenberg, Bortoletto, Ocon, Behrman, whatever, right? This is Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz. Both been in the sport for a few years. Both really experienced. Both proven they can score points. Maybe a little bit of a stinky end to the season for Albon last season, but the start of the season was phenomenal. Definitely carried on from what he was doing in 2023. He was one of the drivers of the season in 2023. Carlos Sainz wins last season, relentless amount of podiums, helped Ferrari take McLaren to the Constructors' Championship in Abu Dhabi. He almost won it with them. You know, Carlos, obviously we know. It's just, I can't explain it more than that. Just it's just an absolutely amazing driver lineup. I mean, it's
amazing for a midfield team. However, my question to you now: which one of them two is going to lead that team?
I think it's a McLaren situation. I don't think there's a number one driver. I think they're both number one drivers. Because the thing is,
can they afford to have a McLaren situation at Williams?
I think they need a McLaren situation because because the issue was that Albon was scoring points, but Logan Sargeant wasn't. Nicholas Latifi wasn't. Right?
Every team though needs a leader at some point in the season. Maybe it's fine equal pegging at the start. Maybe it will sort itself out come mid-season where one's performing better than the other. Maybe it won't. But I feel like you've got to go in with one that you would say is a leader. And obviously Albon has been the leader of Williams in the past few years because he's been with fucking Logie. Yeah. So he wasn't going to be the bloody leader, was he? But he's with Carlos Sainz now. He's come from Ferrari. Ferrari, the only reason they've let Carlos go is because they got Lewis Hamilton. If it's not Lewis Hamilton, the only other person who takes that seat is Max Verstappen.
Yeah, no one takes that seat from Carlos.
No. So, who leads that Williams team? It could be interesting this year between Sainz and between Albon. The power struggle of... Because at some point, you are going to need the team to back you and not the other. At least one race in the season, you will. In every team. You will. You'll have to. So, it's gonna be an interesting dynamic between them two.
It is.
Both former Red Bull drivers.
They are, yeah.
Red Bull Junior drivers.
The natural leader is Alex Albon going into the season, but I think they'll both be number one drivers. I don't think they'll pick between the two, but in the case they have to, they'll pick based on the dependencies of the race and who's ahead at the time. But obviously, I don't think this will be a huge issue for Williams unless in 2026 they're both still at the team and they have a really good car, in which, by the way, people may think I'm crazy for saying that, but Williams, most times out of not, have a tendency to get new regulations right. Maybe apart from 2022. 2020, apart from 2022. Before
and
then...
there was that tweak, was it 2018? 17?
2017.
17.
Yeah.
They fucked that.
But that wasn't a big regulation change. But
no,
more
but
often
they've
than
gone
not,
from being, they were, what, second or third quickest 2014, 15, 16 to last.
Yeah, but it was more of a natural decline, though, wasn't it? I mean, this happened. This happened in the early 2000s. This happened in 2014. It's happened multiple times. Even in 2009, Williams, there was a regulation change where they weren't really anywhere. And in 2009, at the start of the season, they were actually pretty good. It wasn't until McLaren and Ferrari sort of caught back on that they were sort of out of the point. But Williams tend to, well, most of the time get new regulations right. So if 2026 comes around and they are in the top flight, which they very much could be, any of the teams could be, Audi, could be Williams, McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, we don't know, it could be any of them. If Williams are fighting for wins, who do they pick? That will be the question then.
Well, that's the thing for Williams, though. As you said, they're only in the fight for the wins for possibly the first half of the season. They don't have the development.
Well, no, yeah, they always do seem to drop off. I mean, yeah.
They don't develop through the season.
But we'll see anyway. We'll see. James Vowles has taken the team in a different direction. We don't know how they'll deal with 26. It's a whole new... It's sort of like how McLaren are in a new unknown with that. Yeah. It's basically a new team, isn't it, from what it was in the 90s when they last won. Same sort of thing for Williams now with the James Vowles era. So we'll see. But anyway, that is pretty much our scores. Any final thoughts?
No. I'm waiting for the live reveal show. That's soon. That is in a month's time, just over a month.
Yeah. It's weird, isn't it, that we're getting all of them on the same day?
It is. We're getting the liveries. We're not getting the cars. Let's remember that. Yes. It's just the liveries.
Which is the only thing anyone cares about. No one cares about the different specs of car.
No.
People only care about that when testing happens and you can
testing comes.
Yeah. The car reveals, people only care about the liveries. It's not until we get to the actual racing part that people care about what the cars are doing. So,
yeah.
At least they've got that bit sorted. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Okay, real quick, prediction. Who's going to have the best livery?
The best?
Yeah, who's going to have the best livery?
Why you done this to me, man?
I don't know.
I'm going with Ferrari again.
That's fair. I'd probably agree with you. I think Ferrari probably.
I've heard a rumor that they're going darker red this year.
Ooh, Lewis Hamilton in a darker red Scarlet Ferrari rolling up behind you. That's terrifying.
That is terrifying.
I think I don't know why. I've got a feeling. I feel like Haas will bring the sauce.
I think Haas might. Yeah.
I think Haas might bring the sauce. Anyway, let's end it there, shall we? Before we start talking about liveries. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.